Hello, everyone. Welcome to Developmental Psychology, DEP 2004. I am Dr. Rivera. And I want to talk briefly about moral development. This is a concept that is often very difficult for students to get, and especially when they're first learning about it. Now, I want to focus on two theories. The first one is Piaget's theory of moral development. Now, Piaget focuses on two major stages. The first one is moral realism. In moral realism, people believe, specifically children believe, that what is moral is what the authorities believe. So, whoever happens to be the authority in your life, mom and dad, teacher, following mom and dad's rules, that's what makes you moral. These children often have what we call objective morality as well. This is the perception that morality is objective. That is, everybody believes the same thing. And it's very difficult for children to understand that, in fact, people's morals are quite different. And what you might think is super important, I might not care too much about, and vice versa. And then another thing that children who are in this stage believe is in something we call imminent justice. And essentially, what these children believe is that right and wrong are kind of written in the programming of reality. And they believe that if you do something wrong, then you're going to get punished just because the universe is going to punish you for having done something wrong. And of course, it's not very difficult for your brain to sort of go along with this. You do something wrong, and of course, you feel guilty. And then later on, you drop your chips on the floor and your brain goes, oh, you see, these chips, they fell because I did that bad thing earlier this week. And this is the universe's way of punishing me for the thing I did. Now, as a child gets older, they'll hopefully enter what is known to Piaget as autonomous morality. And now the child, usually the preteen to adolescent, is going to start to make judgments on not just what the person did wrong, but why they did the wrong thing. And so maybe stealing is wrong, but stealing formula for your baby, that doesn't seem quite as bad because you're not just making a judgment on the behavior, but also on the intention. It changes what you perceive as being right or wrong. Now, sometimes you can add an extra dimension to that, and it's not just the intentions, but also how much damage was created. And sometimes you go, yeah, that person didn't mean to do all this, but they ended up hurting this person or destroying that thing. And so you take that into account as well. And essentially, what starts to happen is that you realize that morality is difficult. And also, hopefully, as you get older, you'll realize that which thing you value the most, which part of the circumstances is more important to you, is going to affect whether or not you see something right or wrong. Kohlberg's theory is a little bit more complicated. According to Kohlberg, there are three major umbrellas, three stages of moral development. I'd like to point out that this theory doesn't care what you decide is right or wrong. It's only trying to figure out your cognitive process in determining that something is right or wrong. So the three levels are pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. And in fact, I'm going to start out with post-conventional. This is the hardest thing to do, and it's going to be the easier thing to understand, I think. At the post conventional level, you have some ethical things that you value. Maybe you value that hard work should be rewarded, or that self control is important. These are just ethical beliefs that you have developed over the years, and you try to apply them. Now, the post conventional stage has two levels. The last level, because we're going backwards here, is a universals level. And the universal principles level is what you think about when you think about someone who is truly moral. That is, they have ethical beliefs and they try to never break any of those ethical beliefs. And that is incredibly difficult because what happens is every time you account for one ethical belief, it ends up messing up a different one. And so, for example, you might think to yourself, violence is wrong. Someone commits violence, they should be punished. But keeping your word is right. And so if someone asks you to, let's say, keep a secret, and you give them your word that you're going to keep that secret, then they tell you that they're going to beat up someone or they're going to slash the teacher's tires because they don't like them. All of a sudden, you have an ethical dilemma here. You feel that you shouldn't allow this person to commit this act of violence, but you also feel that you can't break your oath that you told them you wouldn't tell anyone, right? Every time you try to fix for one of those, it's going to become even more difficult. Where you say, well, maybe I can convince my friend to not be violent. Um, and that might open up a whole new can of worms. And you have to now account for an extra thing and an extra thing. Most people don't do this well, first of all. People who do it well tend to be people who devote their life to thinking this way. Um, Ethical philosophers. You would like for your judge to do this well, and your psychiatrist and your psychologist, your physician, your lawyer to do this well. But if you read the news at all, you notice that people fail at this all the time. It's in fact quite difficult. And if you have a job like being a judge or a physician or a psychologist, one of the things they tell you is you need to check in with other people because doing ethics is very difficult. And there's a good chance that if you're not paying attention and writing it down and checking in with other people, you might do it wrong. And of course, that could mean bad things for you. It could mean that you could lose your license. It could mean that you end up getting in trouble with the law, etc. Now, you'll notice that there is a second level for the post-conventional. And in the post-conventional, the second stage, or I say the second to last stage, is the social contract. There's a good chance that this is more or less where you're at, especially if you're a college student. This individual is going to say something along the lines of, which one is the lesser of the two evils? Okay. And so your friend told you, I'm going to go slash the teacher's tires, promise not to tell anyone, and you promised before you knew. And a person in this stage is going to say, which one of these is going to be the lesser evil? Is telling going to be the lesser evil, or is letting my friend slash a tire going to be the lesser evil? And whatever they decide, then they chuck the other ethical beliefs that they have. They say, in this situation, that doesn't really matter. Hopefully, this person is going to say, I need to tell someone that my friend is going to slash somebody's tire because I don't want them to end up getting in a car accident or getting my friend into more trouble by letting him commit a felony. Um, and so they're going to chuck away that ethical belief about keeping somebody's confidence. They're going to say, in this situation, that doesn't really matter. I like to point out that someone could do the opposite here. They could go, you know what? It's not my business to tell someone about what my friend is going to do. And so they then ignore their ethical beliefs about the violence. Um, and they just kind of go, well, I'm going to keep my friends confident because it's none of my business. We sometimes do this with relationships, right? You kind of know that maybe your friend's boyfriend is blah, 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 doing something. And you go, you know what? That's none of my business. I'm not going to get involved in that, right? Either way, what you're saying is that you're going to choose the lesser of the two evils. Now, of course, there's a problem. What you think is the lesser of the two evils might not be what I think is. And then, of course, there's going to be that conflict between us. This stage, by the way, is often called the social contract because usually in this stage, most people care about not just doing the lesser of the two evils, but the one that's going to choosing the decision that is going to be most beneficial for most of us, for society. What what decision is going to make it easier for everyone to live in society? Now, in this stage, right, whether you're in the social contract or the universal principles, what I want you to keep in mind is that both of these individuals, both of these stages, people understand and have their own ethical standards. In the next two, they don't have that. In fact, they don't even understand that to a certain degree. The conventional stage are the stages where most people in the planet are in. Most people on the planet are in this stage. People in the conventional stage are not thinking about ethical values. They're not thinking about how is my behavior or this behavior going to affect other people. They don't care about that. They're not paying attention to that. They're focused on either law and order or their social groups. And because I'm going backwards, I'm going to do law and order first. This is the third to last um, stage. And in the law and order stage, most adults should be here. And this person is focused on following the rules and doing what's right according to the law. This person believes that what's right is whatever the law says or whatever the authority figure says, whoever happens to be your authority figure. Now, if you're at this stage and you're like in the fifth grade, it's really not that big of a deal because your authority figure is teacher or mom and dad. And so you think to yourself, well, if I do this, mom would be mad or teacher would be mad. And so then you extrapolate that that is wrong based on the fact that mom or dad would be mad. Or you might say, well, if I do this, then I'll get in trouble with the law. I'll get arrested. And again, that will prevent this person from doing something wrong. You'll notice this stage the most, though, when it doesn't make sense, when it stops making sense. And so, for example, you might hear someone say, well, such and such person went to jail because they had marijuana on them. And you might think to yourself, wait, such and such, the reason they had marijuana is because they have a disease. Let's say they have cancer, and the marijuana helps with their pain. And someone in the law and order stage is going to say, yeah, well, that's sad, but if you have marijuana, the law says you are not allowed to have that. And so you have to go to jail. And you might fight with them and say, how are you going to say that a sick person is going to go to jail for their medication? And this person is just not going to follow you down that train of thought. And they're going to say, nope, if they broke the law, they have to go to jail. You also get weird things where, like, you have an authority figure hurt a child, right? This happens all the time, unfortunately. Maybe a religious figure molests a child, or a teacher is rude and harasses a child. And the parent will go to the authority figure and they'll say, hey, teacher, how can we fix this thing, right? That my son is doing something wrong and that he's making you angry. You might notice that person saying that. You might think, hey, wait a second. It's the teacher that did something wrong, not the kid. But the person in the low and order stage can't follow that train of thought. And they're going to say, no, of course. Of course, it was the kid who did something wrong because the teacher is in charge. And so it has to be the child that did something wrong. That becomes really ugly when you talk about sexual abuse because sometimes the child has been molested and the parent says, it was your fault that you got molested. Why would the priest do that to you unless you were bad? And of course, the child is going to internalize that and feel just awful about that. And that will follow them their entire life. Now, still in the conventional stage, but the social group stage, here, the child usually doesn't care about ethics like they do in the post conventional stage. And this child doesn't care about law and order either. This person cares about their social group. What does my social group think I should do? Now, again, if you're a third grader, it's not that big of a deal because your social group is your mom and dad or your teacher. And so you go, I want my social group to think I'm a good boy or to think I'm a good girl. And so I'm going to do the things that they want me to do. If you stay in this stage for too long, though, everything starts to go haywire and you start doing things that are somewhat ridiculous. If you ever get a chance to be a middle school teacher, you'll notice this. There will be one or two kids, usually, not many, but one or two that are still in this stage, their social group stage. And they'll be interrupting class and making jokes or trying to be funny. And the teacher will get mad at them and say, you're disrupting class and I'm very upset. And these kids will sometimes say things like, I don't know why you're so upset. Everybody else is laughing. And what they're really saying is, my social group clearly is happy with what I'm doing. And so, therefore, what I'm doing has to be right because my social group likes me. I don't understand why you're upset with me because clearly what I'm doing is right. Again, that's all this person cares about. And because the social group is now your friends, instead of the teacher and your parents, your social group is your friends, all of a sudden, now you do things that you think your friends are going to like. Now, sometimes you'll get adults in this stage, and that makes it even more weird. You'll get weird news stories like a man molests his children, and the wife puts in for a divorce. And the wife's friends or family members, or maybe religious group will tell the wife, hey, you should forgive your husband for having molested your children because he repented and he feels bad. And so you should accept his apology and just take him back, right? Now, if you're looking at that from the outside, you might go, that sounds horrible. No, please do not take back the man who molested your children. But someone in the social group stage only cares about the social group. And so they're not interested that, you know, someone got hurt, especially if that person that got hurt isn't part of the social group. So they don't actually care about that. There is a great story that I think is somewhere in the PowerPoint where a woman marries outside of her caste system, right? And her dad hires someone to murder the husband. Now, what's interesting isn't that that happened, that's just awful that that happened. But what's interesting is how people in the community react. And what you get sometimes from the people in the community is that they'll say, what the dad did wasn't wrong. What the dad did was right because he was protecting his daughter from marrying outside of the caste. The person who did something morally wrong was the daughter. She shouldn't have married that guy who was outside of her caste, right? And again, what you see there is someone who is interested in their social group and not about ethical standards or even the law. Now, the pre-conventional stage is sort of the first stages. You're usually literally children, usually in early childhood in these stages. The first one there is self interest. I know what's right because it gets me a reward. Okay. And that's the only way this person understands right and wrong. They don't care what the social group thinks. They don't care what the law or the authority figures think. And they certainly don't have any kind of ethical standards for themselves. They only care about that reward. And again, if you're anywhere from an infant to maybe around 2 or 3 years old, this isn't a problem because who controls rewards? Mom and dad. And so you're going to do things that are going to make mom and dad happy so you get the reward. The problem is it doesn't take that much more time before you're going to start getting in trouble if you don't get out of the stage. By the time that you are in first grade, third grade, if you're still in this stage, you're going to be in trouble all the time. Because all of a sudden, if I'm a third grader, I can devise a plan to, let's say, steal your lunch money where I won't get caught. And if I don't get caught, well, then I got a reward, right? I got your lunch money. And so now I don't understand that what I did was wrong. Because how could it be wrong? I ended up with a reward. You'll hear people say this even as adults. They'll say things like, well, that person's rich, so they can't be doing something wrong. They're rich. What they're saying is they're getting a reward. And so, therefore, what they did wrong doesn't matter. In fact, it doesn't even exist in this person's mind because they don't understand morality from any other perspective except that reward. And even a little bit younger, pre-conventional kids might be at the obedience stage. And here, what they're worried about is avoiding punishments. Again, if you're very young, the person doling out punishments is going to be mom and dad, teacher, maybe grandma. And so you learn how to avoid punishments from them. But by the time you're in the second or third grade, you can start devising plans in your head that will get you away from punishments, even though you did something wrong. And for the person who is in the obedience stage, they don't see themselves as having done something wrong because no one punished them for it. And so, therefore, how could it be wrong if they never got punished? All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. And remember that the best way to contact me is directly through Canvas. I hope to hear from you soon.